Hey up there guys, how's it going? I figured that I'd start off this first video by kind of just chatting through my process and probably how it's changed, especially from the previous videos that I've uploaded onto this channel. I figured it might be a little bit more interesting to have a look at what I have been doing and how certain things have changed up really. And what my plans going ahead are probably the better thing. As you can probably tell already, this isn't very scripted, which probably is going to be potentially unusual for what I intend to do with this. I'm very much sticking with this kind of format in the sense of the focus is on painting, as in visually. But then I kind of want to mix it up by various things that I want to talk about. So things like reviews, different tips, painting tips and things like that, which is, I think, initially what I wanted to do anyway. It works out a lot better, I think, to do something like that and keep the variety up. Some of what I do chat about might not interest you. Some of it might. All of it might. But I'm just doing it for a bit of fun, really. I've always got to be creating something, whether it be some stupid roll and write board game, or a painting, or just drawing, or some other weird project or hobby that I should really not spend my money on. So yeah, welcome. This, I guess, will be the first episode in speech marks of Dog's Dinner. As you can see on here, I'm actually, well, first off, this painting is going to be a lot more relaxed than what I usually do. I do tend to line with black ink, with Winsor & Newton's India ink. But when I'm kind of feeling extra lazy, I'll just go over the solid black with Sharpie. Because why not? Why the fuck not? I realised long ago that actually it's more important to have fun while you paint, and that's where all of it comes from. As long as you, in my opinion, as long as you can paint, spit shade, whatever, the normal way, although what the fuck does that even mean, then I think it's just takes some of the pressure off, right? So hence why I'm doing all the solid black in Sharpie. Full kind of disclosure, this paper isn't the best stuff. This is a design that I've had waiting on my shelves to fill in for something like this, because I have been planning on doing something like this for a long time. Its design itself is probably 3 or 4 months old, something like that. And as you can tell, it's extra loose too. You'll see by the end just how loose I'm talking about. But I was inspired by, I think you've probably all seen Deadly Prey Gallery, a bunch of African artists from various African countries doing some really cool paintings on potato sacks and flour sacks and things like that. And they're just so over the top, these paintings of like popular films. They are absolutely fantastic. And I was inspired by one that they did of The Thing, that one of the artists did of The Thing. And I thought, that's really cool. I really want to do something similar. And so that's what I did. Hence this, whatever the fuck this is. So yeah, I hope you do enjoy this format. I hope it's something that you are interested in. Obviously, I do want some measure of like community from it, I suppose. Attention is probably the wrong word, but obviously you always want to know if people like stuff, so any feedback is always appreciated, as with anything that I do. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of so yes. Like I said, this one's a lot more looser. I do have some other stuff scripted. One of the upcoming episodes I intend to write about a discussion to do with the Enfield haunting, which is a paranormal case here in Britain. based in North England, North London suburb, which I've always found absolutely interesting. Great. I am terrible with words. Again, as you can tell, this is very much not scripted. Here you can see that I'm then going over that shading with pencil, because obviously that's how you get it to look nice and peppery. Once again, this paper really isn't great for it. I can't even remember what it is, but it's really not the right thing. It is cold press, but it's some, I'd say cheap cold press. It wasn't actually that cheap, but it acts very much like a cheap cold press, in which case, to just steer clear of it. If I could remember what it was. I think it was Fluid. I think that's what it was called, which I think is usually an American brand. It's not great, but it is what it is. I've learned a long time ago that by doing splits and things like that and collaborating with other people, it's really handy to get a hold of different papers and try different things. And so I like to think now that I can pretty much work with any paper, really, in some fashion, at least anyway. I think I'm just doing a bit more of the shading. It's hard to get the texture right on this. Like I said, on this cheap stuff, because it just doesn't do very well. I was also really struggling to keep the whole painting in frame. As you can tell, I'm working with a very makeshift setup at the moment, which is actually my microphone arm hung over the desk and my phone attached by elastic bands. So yeah, it's not ideal, but I think that if I get enough kind of interest, enough people enjoying it really, then I'll invest in some other bits. At the moment, as with everything, as with every single project that I've ever done, I enjoy the kind of janky aspect to it. I like it, so I hope that you do too. A few other things that I've intending on doing, so a few tips, things. I'm in the middle of, at the moment, of writing a document, which if you were a recipient of the Dog's Dinner newsletter that I put out every month, then you might already be aware of it. It's basically going to be a tips document. I'm not entirely sure in which form it'll take. I did want to make a little zine out of it, because, I love fucking making zines out of shit. But yeah, I think it might just make more sense as potentially a companion to this, to have broken down into paper, paintbrushes, inks, things like that. Just in this format, where I'm talking fairly loosely about the subject and about the stuff that I've learned. I'm not the best, right? I'm certainly not the best. I'm sure you can tell that. And I am, leagues behind most. But I feel like I have really learned a lot of really interesting stuff. Really. Or at least stuff that will make you not waste your money. Because that is something, when getting into this hobby, that is something that really does come out quite a bit, is, you find your own thing. And that's also true. You will find what works for you. I'm going to swear by some stuff that you will not be able to like, that you won't be able to get on with. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. You work with whatever you want to work with. I'm just going to give you it from my point of view. And you also have to, as always, take into account what I say with a pinch of salt. Because the way that I work, the way that I draw, the way that I paint, it's very janky. It's very fucking weird. It's not repaints, It's not repaints by like other people on Instagram. Some very cool people on Instagram. I'm trying to refrain from saying names, because if someone stumbles upon this, then it's just going to be some random name. But I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about. Or the group of people really that I'm talking about can do some really, really clean repaints. Beautiful, beautiful repaints, but that's just not what I can do. It's very difficult. very difficult to make it look as clean as them. So yeah, again, I think I'm just finishing the black now. So as I'm going into the first colour, there's usually a thought process in my head. I used to work a different way. I used to work from lightest to darkest, and that's not usually how you would work in tattooing. So tattooing's taught me a lot, even when it comes to painting. It's usually you want to do it this way when you tattoo. You want to go from dark to light, generally, as a general rule. It does depend on what inks you're using, what pigments you're using when you are tattooing. But that's a different story anyway. So I'm going straight in for my green. Now there's a couple of reasons why, if I'm going to put green in a painting, that I'll go with the green first now. And it's basically because it's easier with the yellow that I use, which is the PH Martin's medium Hansa yellow, Hansa medium yellow I think it's called, the Hydrus version of it, which is watertight, so that's great. It's also thicker. It's a lot thicker than this Ecoline that you can see at the moment, this green. And I'll put the green in first, because obviously it's more liquid. It works, it's a lot easier to kind of work with and blah 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 blah. But when you put the yellow next to it, so when you kind of go over it with the yellow, it doesn't bleed in too much, because I think it's because the yellow's quite thick. If I was to do it with the other Ecoline, then it might do a little bit more, it might run a little bit more, but I've never really had problems with it. I have had some friends who've had a few issues with it, but I've never really had any problems with it. So maybe in one of these videos I can kind of show exactly what I do. You can see coming up to this bit that I start kind of flapping a little bit. It ends up being a bit of a mess, and that's just all part of it. It's all part of painting. It's all part of learning. I like to think now that I can usually salvage any painting that I fucked up. It's not always the case. I did one recently which I think I didn't really salvage. In fact, I made worse. But I know realistically not to do that again. But as you can see on here, this green ends up becoming quite patchy, which again is more to do with the paper, I promise, than anything else. I know, poor workman blames his tools and all that, but it is mostly that problem, I can assure you. Certain inks, certain colours work better on certain paper. There's different rules to working with them on different things as well. So with this being a very poor quality cold press, you've got to work pretty quick, and you've got to layer that down quite thick as well, which is hard to do on these super watery inks. So it is quite tricky. I've started putting a lot more black in paintings now, because that's really what you want to do with tattooing. You always want to think, well, that's what keeps tattoos, right? It's what keeps tattoos from absolutely falling out, is the black. It's the black that contains it all. The black will be there long after any of the other colour. And so I've tried putting more black in my designs now so that I can tattoo them appropriately too. And I think that's something that's fairly reflected here. A lot of this, and you'll probably even see actually in those old videos that I put up, that's a big part of what's changed in my designs now. There's a lot more black in them. There's still not enough. As a general rule, I've often been told that it should be about a third of the design. So a third of the design should be black, a third of the design should be colour, a third should be skin gap. So just white, on a painting. But yeah, skin gap. I think there's obviously a lot of times when you can bend those rules, but I haven't got to that stage yet. I honestly find putting in a lot of black really intimidating. Obviously, it can be very, very dark, but it makes some of the lines harder to see. It just causes a lot of problems for me personally. So it's something that I struggle with quite a bit, and it's something that I absolutely need to just get on with, really, and do. So yeah, you'll hopefully see that as an evolution throughout this channel, potentially, as I get more comfortable. I've been painting for probably about 4 years now, drawing trad designs and things like that for around that kind of time. Although this certainly isn't a trad design, but basically flash painting, right? Whatever that means now, really. It's different. It's different now. You wouldn't classify this really as flash, I suppose, if you got down to it. Or traditional, really. It's definitely not traditional. But I use the same techniques to paint everything, and that I think is very traditional when we're talking about traditional tattooing anyway. So I'm just finishing up on the green here. It's a super nice green. It's an eco line. Which one is it? Just give me a second. It's 654, which I think is like the blue green, fur green. We can make a really nice blue too. If you do oceans, if you do waves, if you do sky, you can mix it with a little bit of blue. I only use blue pencil because I basically haven't found an ink nice enough that I like well enough, really. I used to use a much darker kind of blue aqua tealy colour, which I grew to really love, and I think actually it came to being a really identifiable thing for my paintings, but I don't use it anymore, and I've been very tempted to get back into it, but obviously, I haven't got around to it. So here's what I'm talking about with the yellow. You might see some bleed, and honestly you'll probably see the yellow going a little bit green too, because I tend to go over the edges a bit too much, which will then, it's not the actual bleed, it's me like pulling the ink from pulling the green from the green, and then like smudging it, for want of a better word. Like how you used to have crayons, and you'd make the mistake of going over the black one with the yellow one. It's basically the same thing. So that is the only problem with this, with the way that I'm doing it. But it means that I don't blend. It means that I don't pull or spit shade that pull between the green and the yellow, because it kind of already does it for me. That's the main reason why I do it that way. I did used to do it the other way, so I'd put the yellow first. But actually it means you're doing two pulls, right? Because otherwise you've just got a solid yellow on one side and then a pull on the other. So you can see where I'm doing this now. I would have had to have pulled it out just behind that tooth, and then pulled it out here as well. And it's just, I'm too lazy for that, right? And that's really, I suppose, what it is. I'm just far too lazy for that. I can't be asked. So that's how we do it now. I find when you start tattooing, if that is the goal, that all of this kind of becomes, obsolete's the wrong word, but it takes a lot of the pressure off. Painting isn't for worrying, painting isn't for panicking. There's no big deal if you fuck a painting up. It doesn't matter. You can redo it if you want to. Although honestly, I don't think I ever really have, because if I fucked it up, then that means I will just go and sulk for a long time and feel pretty bad about myself. So yeah, tattooing is the real pressure, right? So while you're painting, try and enjoy yourself. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure for getting stuff right, for getting a portfolio together, for, being as good as you possibly can. But that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't be having fun with it, or that you should be putting so much pressure on that you're not enjoying it anymore. Because then you're just going to become soulless and dead inside. And that's usually not so good. Some of this yellow is getting a little bit dirty now. I make sure to dab it on a bit of kitchen paper in between, because like I said, because of those smudges that I'm running too much into the yellow, if you wanted a bigger gradient, you could pull that green out more, or go into the green more with the yellow, and it'll make like a nice in-between colour. I like to keep my pulls fairly small. I've switched to a bigger brush that I found that I've had for absolutely donkey's years. By donkeys I mean like 3 or 4 really, since I started painting. But actually it's been giving me bigger pulls, so bigger. When I'm talking about pulls, I'm talking about the watery or spit blend that comes out from the ink. So that nice gradient that comes out. It's been giving me longer ones of those, so that's really nice. And it's just something different to work with, because obviously I've been painting for a fair while now, and it's just spiced it up a little bit. Makes me think a little bit differently about things. It's really good for like skin tones or skins in general, because you want quite a big pull for skin. Here's another thing that I fuck up. My favourite pencil, my favourite blue. This didn't look very well. Didn't look very nice at all when I put it on there. Partially because of the positioning. But yeah, I really didn't like it. So I just did it super fucking hard here. And thought, fuck it, there's nothing I can do now. I might as well. So put a little gradient in there, then went over that bit there under the eye to also give it a nice, more solid thing. It looks a bit messy, but again, I'm not worried about it. It doesn't matter. I can sort that out. If someone were to want this tattooed, I can sort that out. It doesn't matter. I also, in case you don't realise, or I haven't discussed it before, or you haven't heard me talk on a live, I don't like putting solid blocks of colour in anywhere. I just, again, find it really intimidating. I think it's important to do in tattooing in certain places, but I still try and steer clear of it for that reason, because now that it's can be tattooed, you don't really want to chew people up, right? So I'm just looking back at this video now, and actually you can't really tell with that blue and the green. It's actually really similar in colour on the video. It's not in real life. You probably are aware by my terrible lighting that it's evening when I recorded this. And so I'm working by lamplight, and it's not great. It's not the best, but you know, again, it's something that I've got to work on, something that I'm trying to get better at, something that I need to take account of more in the future. This is certainly a learning experience for me, even just watching this back and learning to edit this, learning to put this together. I've got a few thumbnails and little intros and stuff that I've got planned. It's a really janky animation. That's literally just pictures like thrown together, which I think is a little bit fun, a little bit stupid. I'm not planning on doing that. But for this first one, I did want people to kind of be aware of what they're getting themselves in for. So I'm sure it's very generic content. I've had a lot of people ask, you know, painters who are first starting and stuff like that. I've had a lot of people ask for tips and advice, so I thought this was quite a good format to put it in, if I'm honest, as well. So that's one of the reasons. Some other upcoming stuff that I've got a review of a horror series, an old horror series, one of my favourites, that should be coming relatively soon. I don't want to commit entirely to anything, but then I also don't want to flake out of everything, because I have a terrible habit of creating something, doing it once, and then going, nah, fuck that, I'm done now. So again, if you've made it this far somehow, it would be absolutely great if you dropped a comment just for feedback. If you thought it was shit, please. I'm not going to block anything. I'm not going to think. I'd just love some feedback. You can see this ink here, and again, it's the paper. This ink is the Ecoline Red. I'm not too sure what number it is. It's quite light anyway, so you do often have to go over it a couple of times, but it kind of settles darker than it looks, if that makes sense. It is quite a nice saturated red, but on this paper it still does look super light, and it doesn't look dark enough. It almost looks like an orange now, actually, looking back at it, but yeah. But you can see in my paintings on my Instagram, it's usually the red that I use, so you can see how different it is there. It's probably the poor lighting as well, let's be honest. But I just wanted to go a little bit crazy with this one. I didn't want to take it too seriously. I didn't really have a plan for colours. I don't usually. I usually just wing it and fucking hope for the best. Sometimes it works out great. Sometimes it really doesn't. But again, it's all about having fun with it. You've always got to think about where you're putting the colour as to what is next to it as well, right? So when I'm talking about putting too much black somewhere, it's because you want black kind of somewhere else. So here's a good example of that. That red, it's not that bad there, but I would have preferred something else. It's not that bad because the black's next to it blocking it from the other red. But it's all these things that you've got to think about. And if you're just starting, it can be quite overwhelming, and you'll wonder why something doesn't look right. And that is probably why. It's all these little things that you pick up slowly. If you're a veteran and you're watching, I say veteran, I'm not a veteran, but if you know how to paint and you're watching, just tell me to shut up, because all of this you probably already know. I did go a little bit stupid with this, put purple in the teeth, because I couldn't think of any other colour to put in. But actually I don't think it turned out that bad, if I'm honest. I think because everything else is fucking garish. Garish? Never know how to pronounce that. Then the purple in the teeth, not that you can see it much here, actually really helps. Really makes it alright. We're coming to an end now. So I really appreciate you guys watching. I really appreciate you guys taking your time out just to... If you've watched this all the way through, thanks, man. It's far too kind of you. I really do mean that. I owe a lot to this community, and you all know the deal, right? You've heard me chat shit enough times. There it is. All done. And it's for sale. If you want it, let me know. It'll be cheap.